In the heart of Kings Island, an amusement park in Mason, Ohio, stood a legendary roller coaster that once captured the imagination of thrill seekers and coaster enthusiasts alike. Son of Beast. I'm Don Helbig alongside Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Yeah, Son of Beast, man. You talk about it's funny that we're hitting the day and age where Son of Beast is legendary with like some of the younger people have heard about it but have never ridden it. Is that strange to you? I mean, to me it was like
Yeah, I
yesterday.
mean it. Yeah, but I mean it's been what 14 years since it last operated,
hmm
but it's still is very very much a topic of conversation. It's just one of those polarizing attractions that you know for years people have continued to talk about it since it gave its last rides.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk all about the history, the records, the turmoil with that ride. This is an interesting one. So let's get this out of the way. So I'll tell you this: I don't miss it. Do you?
No, I don't. It was never one of my favorite roller coasters that I had ridden. It was not a favorite of mine as a PR person,
hmm
having to deal with a lot of the, inquiries about it, over and over again about is it open today? Is it going to open next week? Is it going to open this year? So yeah, not at all. I don't miss it at all.
Yeah, I don't miss it from from a guest standpoint. I always thought it was rough. I thought it was boring. Um, but it's funny how interesting it is, regardless of that. For a ride that wasn't that good, at least in our opinion, it's definitely a good story to tell. So we went back to it was announced in the summer of 1999 because it opened in 2000, correct?
Correct.
And then you were not part of the park then. You were riding the racer, of course. But uh, there's a video online, and so your homework after this, and after you watch the Attractions Group podcast, look up Sean Flaherty, Son of Beast announcement. And you can find a Don Helbig with a full head of hair watching the announcement. But it's I haven't watched the video in a while, but they had Montel Williams, who's a roller coaster enthusiast, announce the ride. Right? What are your memories of that day?
Yeah, he came in to be kind of the official spokesperson for the announcement for the park. He was a big roller coaster fan. I guess he still is maybe, but he had visited the park every year, was on his bucket list to hit Kings Island and other amusement parks around the country, just to ride roller coasters, the newest, the biggest, the fastest ones out there. So he was a legitimate roller coaster fan, and they had him in for it. They had a model on
hmm
display of what the ride was going to look like. It wasn't a working model, but it was one that was kind of encased a little bit just to show just the massiveness of what this was going to be. I mean, it wasn't as long as the Beast, but it was a lot taller, a lot faster, a lot more twists and turns. I mean, it was all inspiring. When you looked at it with that
Oh,
height,
absolutely.
the speed it was going to hit. I think it was what 214-foot vertical
200,
drop,
yeah.
speeds up to 78 miles per hour. So all the statistics of it, were very very impressive. But just from the time of that announcement and looking at the model, my thoughts were that's pretty big for a wooden roller coaster, especially coming down that first drop at 214 feet and then going back up a big incline and then turning real sharp. I thought that's going to put a lot of stress on that structure right there. Going at that speed, the weight of the trains. You looked at the roller coasters that John Allen designed. There's a reason why he always had the drop and then a couple of small hills. One hill, maybe two hills after that before you went back up again. The Beast, the way that was designed by Al Collins and Jeff Granke, you come down that first drop and then you make a sharp turn, but it's not very high on that turn. You maybe go up, what, 20, 30 feet high or something around that turn before you drop again. So it was just different than anything I had ever seen on a wooden roller coaster. So I was concerned about it from the beginning, just, how that was going to hold up.
Yeah, so
And
so the video that I've seen of the announcement, there's several familiar faces in there, you included, as I stated. But they had Montel Williams make the announcement. Now, legend has it, and I don't know if you can substantiate this or not, but he was given some notes to say this and don't say this, and he's fumbled with it, and that's why if you watch the end of the video, he kind of trips over himself, and he's like, "Here's Son of Beast," So I don't know if that's true
yeah,
or
there were
not.
cards that he was reading off of. He was going through, a stack of cards and that, but that's a tough, situation to be in when you're brought in from the outside, and you don't have a lot of time to really prepare for
Hmm.
that, and you're just given these, cue cards to read and everything. But it was in a nice setting, back, behind the scenes of the Beast, in that first drop area back there, and so the setting was really nice for it. Now, one of the things that, right off the bat, that was a red flag for me was the name Son of Beast,
Right.
because it gave it an expectation
Hmm.
of what this ride was going to be about. You're naming it after the beast, son of beast. So the expectation would be that it's going to be, better than the beast. So I thought right off, the start that, the ride was going to have a tough time living up to that name. Even if everything had worked out, you still had to live up to that name. And I just thought, there had never been, anything like the beast before it debuted. There wasn't anything like it since. So to me, that was a tough act to follow.
Yeah, I agree. And then I remember riding it when it was new. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, it was initially started by the Roller Coaster Corporation of America, and infamously, RCCA went bankrupt during the process of the building. Kings Island Construction took over, finished the project. They got trains from Premier Rides initially, which weighed a boatload. And that was so it had the momentum to successfully complete the vertical loop, which was a unique feature on it. Um,
Yeah,
so
the
it,
loop.
I so I don't I, when I wrote it when it was new, it was like August or so. When it was brand new, was it smooth? Because wood coasters have a tendency to be.
No, it was never from, my first ride on it, which was Media Day in 2000. And that was after several, delays getting it open. And you're going to have that with new rides. I mean, you see that, throughout the industry
Right.
that, they say spring or whatever. There's never really you're not going to be for sure. You're going to have to do all the testings and things like that. But the big part for me, maybe it wasn't that the track and everything made it uncomfortable. It was just trains, just being as heavy as they
Hmm.
were. And just when it would go up, come out of the station and go up the lift, it just was kind of intense on my back a little bit, just from the start there with that. So the trains were never comfortable, and I think that was more than anything else with it. But I remember getting off the ride, and there's lots of media around there, and they all knew me from riding the racer, so they all come to where I was, sitting to get my reaction. And there's 7, 8, 9 mics, right in my face. And, there's, what do you think? You just wrote Son of Beast. How does it compare, to the Beast? And, my answer was, the similarities are different.
Yeah.
So that's what I said, because, it didn't, it was totally different. There wasn't anything you could really, compare. There wasn't the similarities or anything between the rides. I mean, they both were, big, mean, aggressive in that. But, I rode it multiple times. It was okay, but it just wasn't that roller coaster that made me want to ride it over and over again. I still preferred the Beast. I preferred the Racer. I preferred Vortex. So it wasn't going to be my ride of choice.
Hmm.
Unless I had friends coming to the park with me. A lot of members from the American Coaster Enthusiasts would visit, and I'd meet them. And they'd want to ride it in the morning, before it opened, or maybe at night or something. And I would do it then. But for the most part, it wasn't going to be my ride of choice.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I remember in 2009 when it shut down, which ultimately ended up being for good. I hadn't ridden it that season because I was so concentrated on riding Diamondback, which had just opened, and I didn't even really feel the disappointment to be. I hate to keep on dogging on the dead, but here we are.
No, but I mean, it was okay. It was pedestrian like. Outside of the statistics of the ride experience was very pedestrian
Hmm.
like. It wasn't, top 10, top 20. Wasn't the worst, but it wasn't top 10, top 20. And when you looked at all the statistics of it, it should have been.
Yeah, I mean it was designed with records in mind, not with riders in mind. Now let's move on. So the ride operated for for almost a decade. Uh, well, no, not even almost a decade, a little over a half decade. So you come to Cedar Fair in 2007, and you kind of get a prison welcome from it. Tell me about that experience.
That was my first, the first project that I had to work on was opening Son of Beast after it had been closed down the year before in
Hmm.
2006. Uh, the loop had been removed, so it was going to be a different ride experience. So before inviting the media out for a little media preview of it, and then opening it up for guests, I wanted to get a few rides on it just so I knew what I'd be talking about. I didn't want to say it's going to be this or that without experiencing it. And I was in the minority. I actually thought the ride experience was better,
Mm-hmm.
with the different trains. They were lighter, they were more comfortable. Um, I liked the track work they did, in replacing the loop. That was done, in house. Jeff Gramke was involved with doing that part of it. It flew through there, so I thought the ride experience actually improved, taking the loop out. But the loop is what separated it from other wooden roller coasters. Important piece, but in taking it out, for me, it made the ride better.
I agree, and it'll always be remembered with the loop, hence the memorial at Banshee, and we'll get to Banshee replacing it later. But so fun fact about the loop, and I've heard this from several different sources, so I believe it's true now. So for those of you who weren't around to experience the loop was wooden track, but it had a metal structure, so it looked like the loop on like an arrow looper or whatever. It just had wooden track. One of the designs that they had was an all wooden structure, but there were two loops and they would slide back and forth so you can maintenance one while you're running another and then you'd slide it over. That sounds horrible. Have you ever heard that before? Can you substantiate that at all?
I cannot substantiate that. Um, only what I knew, of the ride, when it opened and they had the loop, and then afterward when they did the track work. But I thought, in opening it back up in 2007, as my first project there, that the ride experience, had been improved, enhanced. It was more comfortable. It was rewritable.
Hmm.
So again, it still wasn't going to be my go-to ride. There was going to be others that were going to be of choice before that, but it was still, it had become fun, more enjoyable. So, I was excited about that.
Yeah, and so another factoid is that the trains, they got Gerstlauer trains, and they were recycled from the Myrtle Beach Cyclone at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion, which was completely torn down right beforehand. So cheers to them wherever those trains are now, probably in a
Yeah,
landfill
and
somewhere.
it's interesting. Like the original trains were too heavy
Hmm.
for the structure, and then the layout and the design was too violent for the other trains. So, and they were tearing apart the trains. So,
Yeah.
they couldn't win. It was just plagued from the
I
start.
remember initially, I don't know if it was you and I talking about this or somebody else, but the trains were not to the gauge of the track. So they were originally going to re-gauge the entire track. And then just, the conversation just got forgotten about. But I noticed they actually changed the trains. So the trains, when they pulled into the station, almost looked like they hovered because they clearly readjusted whatever chassis is underneath to fit that track. So it's kind of like when you have one of those little like hatchback cars and somebody puts like the big wheels that stick out on them. That's what it kind of reminded me of. Okay, so now let's move on to so Son of Beast closes what turned out to be for good in 2009. So very, let's say infamously, no offense, you repeatedly told the enthusiast, myself included, no decision's been made about the future of Son of Beast.
If I had a nickel for every time that I said no decision's been made, I'd
Mm,
have a yacht and be living in Tampa or something. But that was the case. I mean, I don't know how many times, everybody kept wanting an update every day, and we, said when there's news, we'll tell you
hmm.
there's news. So I don't know why people kept asking over and over again the same questions. And it wasn't just the guests. I mean, it was media that would ask the same questions, every month. I knew on this date that I was going to hear from somebody, and they were going to ask that same question. Any update? When there was news, we would let you know. And that was kind of like I said, it became kind of a joke where no decision has been made. You still see that being thrown out there
Right.
a lot of times now with things, but no decision had been made. And when the decision was made, it was announced.
Yeah.
And it was on this date in 2012 when that was announced. And, there was transparency there.
Hmm.
As soon as the park knew, the guest and the media knew that it was going to come down and to make way for future park expansion, which became Banshee. It was the right decision for the park to make. I mean, the ride had been cleared. Now, let's talk about that. After it gave its last rides in 2009, I mean, it was cleared to operate.
Hmm.
The state had made, come out, looked at it, and everything was operating the way it's supposed to. So the park could have operated it. But the general manager at the time, Greg Scheid, he wasn't comfortable with it. Other people at the park weren't comfortable with it. Me as the PR person, I wasn't comfortable with it. So I felt, that was the right decision after they spent, a couple years looking at all the different alternatives, all the different options. There's a lot of different, companies that came out that, you know, design, build roller coasters, looked at it. There were, if we do this, I think that'll work. Well, you couldn't
Hmm.
have. I think it's going to work. It had to work. And then the cost to do some of those ideas, if it was going to work, it just made more sense to just bring it down and just start over from scratch with a brand new roller coaster. I thought they had a winner in Banshee,
Hmm.
so that was a great choice to replace it.
Hmm.
Reliable, one of the most popular rides in the park, one of the most popular invert coasters out there. So um, yeah, I think that made the right decision. I mean, it was a tough decision, but it was the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And so we had the period from 2009 until 2012 that the ride stood standing but not operating. You were asked repeatedly about it. As the guy that ran KI Central at the time, I was asked quite a bit off. They would call you and you would say no update, and then they call me and they try to a lot of swindling, like hey, I
Yeah,
heard that they took the air conditioning unit out of the dry box. I distinctly remember one of the news reporters saying that, and I said, "Well, the ride's not operating, so if they needed it somewhere else, like, wouldn't you?" And then a lot of times they were. I don't know if you got this as a PR guy. You probably got it worse than I did, but I got a lot of like, "Don't you think the people have the right to know?" And I said, "Well, it's a company and they're you know it's not a life or death, and it's not really a purchasing decision as to whether or not that's going to open. Just assume it's not, so it was a lot of stuff like that nonetheless. So
yeah.
I
There's
just
always going to be the conspiracy theories, with it. That anytime somebody saw somebody back there just even cutting the grass around it, it opened a whole new, you know, boatload of rumors and things.
mhm,
So it was something that, as the parks PR person at the time, I did have to deal with it almost on a daily basis, answering questions. I'd walk around the park, people were coming up, what's going on with this, and the answer was no decision had been made.
yeah,
And until it was, and like I said, it was made on July 27th of 2012. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the word came down to me that that was going to happen. And 4 o'clock, after I had, typed up the release and that, it went out to the media and, went out to the different fan sites and that, and everybody knew that the decision had been made and there was going to be future park expansion there. And then, about a month later, end of August, that's when the demo work began. And, I went back several times and chronicled that and
mhm,
got different photos and that of it coming down. And I remember one of when the lift hill came down, uh, I'd never seen anything, before in my career of that coming down like that. But when the lift hill came down and it just went all over the ground, there's all these little pieces of wood. I remember taking a picture and, tweeting it out and, who's up for a game of pickup sticks?
yeah. Yeah, talk about kindling. Now I know that you were there. I've got other friends that I guess that would have been in the very early spring of what 13 or so or whatever. But other employees said that even if they didn't know it was going down that day, they found out that it was the loudest, most punching noise that they had ever heard of that thing hitting the ground, and it sent shockwave. What are your memories of just like the noise and the impact of seeing it? Because you probably had one of the best
I
views.
didn't really, yeah, I was up on a hill. Um, I didn't really, remember the noise that much because I was focused on getting the shot.
Hmm.
So I had two things that were going on, number one, capturing video of it, and then number two, capturing a photo of it. Because I knew if I got the right shot with the photo, that I could, get that to Associated Press and I could get that, throughout the country. And, that happened because I was fortunate enough to get it just at the right time as it's like bending, coming down. You see wood flying.
Hmm.
So the shot, and I don't know, a lot of, our listeners, probably have seen that out there on social media. Uh, but that's what my focus was on. So the noise itself, I don't really recall that, what the noise was, because I was so worried about getting the right shot. You had one chance to get that. I had to get it right.
Yeah, so so that ride came down. Not long after the rumors started circulating that they were going to be adding a new ride and in that location, which was pretty woefully apparent. And in what was it, 8/8 of 2013? Was that the right date?
2023. Yeah,
They
exactly. Yeah. August 8th. Yes.
so you were still the PR guy at the time. You announced Banshee. So Banshee obviously has been a home run. Everybody knows what Banshee is. But how this relates directly is that in the video in which everybody was introduced to Banshee, it started off with Son of Beast collapsing in the video. Talk about the decision to put that in there, and what was that like for you with as far as closure is concerned, seeing that and Banshee rising from the ashes of Son of Beast.
Well, I thought that was the perfect way uh, to turn the page.
Hmm.
This is no longer here. Get excited about what's coming, and I'm going to give Greg Scheid, the general manager, all the credit for that. He felt that there had to be some kind of a transition. Not just a new ride, but we need to make a transition because that site was so polarizing, and what was been there and everything that had gone on with that. That there had to be some kind of a tie-in, a transition to what's coming, what's new, and I thought it worked beautifully with that teaser video. That's my favorite teaser video that I was involved with.
Oh, hands down, hands down. Because if you look at the major ones that you did, like Diamondback was in the early stages, so that was a POV and whatever. And then Mystic Timbers was cool with like the vines and stuff. Orion was neat, but we kind of like we knew it was a space theme and stuff, so I feel like there wasn't a lot to accomplish with the video. But with Banshee, with Son of Beast crumbles, and this is all on YouTube. Look for Banshee announcement. Son of Beast crumbles, and then Banshee rises from the ashes. It was just, it was chilling.
The cheers that night. I
Mm,
mean, just the applause. And that whole night, it was an electric atmosphere at the park.
mhm,
Almost like a rock concert type environment. People got to the park, the guests early in the day. They started camping out to get their spot. It was just wall to wall guest in Action Zone. It was unprecedented to do a nighttime announcement. I remember sending out the media invite and it said 10 p.m.
mhm.
and every news outlet contacted me right after receiving the invite and wanted to let me know there's a typo on your invite. It says 10 p.m. You meant 10 a.m., right? And I said, no, nope, 10 p.m. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, well, that's not a great time for us. And it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't ideal. But what we felt at the park was this was going to be in August. The ride was going to open in, April. So if the media could not come out that night, you know, we hope they did, but if they didn't, it wasn't the end of the world because we had all these other months, to plan for it, get the word out about it, show construction photos, and if people didn't know by April that, you know, we were opening this spectacular new roller coaster Banshee, then that was on us, So it worked out though. Every media outlet, Cincinnati, Dayton, we had Columbus, some Indianapolis, everybody was there, and it was just tremendous turnout. They all did their live shots. They did live shots in the morning
Mhm.
leading up to it, the afternoon, the evening news. They interviewed guests, everybody about their speculation and it was great. The thing about it that day, there was a lot of, I remember the weather forecast was not favorable.
Yeah.
We had a backup plan to move it to the Fest House. So there wasn't a lot of, the weather. We kept looking at the weather
Mhm.
and it looked like there was going to be a little bit of a window. It did rain a little bit, in the evening before we got to it. We have the announcement and it wasn't, 15, 20 minutes after, we did the announcement, the interviews took place and they were all getting ready to do their live show. Then it poured, then the rain came down. So, we just escaped, that part of it. But I think it had been in the Fest House, it wouldn't have been as, that environment would not have been what it was. The atmosphere wouldn't have been there.
Oh, yeah,
So it
completely
worked
agree.
out great. But that was a good closure though. I'm glad you brought
Yeah,
that
no,
up,
that was
about
my
the band
like
tonight because
in all my time doing what I did alongside you in my role outside of Kings Island covering it. Um there's a lot of memorable moments and I brought a lot of them up, but that was one of the ones when I was like mind blown. Because people had figured out it was Banshee. A lot of people knew it was inverted. A lot of people had seen that, it was the blueprints or whatever, but nobody saw that coming. Nobody thought that there was going to be the fall of Son of Beast and the Phoenix, the Banshee rises. So with that being said,
yeah, that was beautiful
take
with
a
it.
swing on Banshee. As you enter Banshee's queue, look to your left first of all. My name's on one of the graves. Thanks, Don. And then you continue on, and on the right side, you can't miss it. It's got a flame on it most of the time. There's the Son of Beast Memorial. If somebody puts one on it, it's not saying it's coming back, by the way. Don't fall for that trap. I remember that last year. But yeah, so yeah, for those of you who didn't get to ride it, I'm sorry to hear that, but honestly, you're coming out ahead with Banshee. But 218 feet tall, designed by Werner Stengel, built partially by the Roller Coaster Corporation of America. That's son of beast for you people.